But Dr. Percec, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to the deep end.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I think I would like to just start with your background and journey. It's unique. You have an MD and PhD, both done here at Penn. You did your residency here and stayed on here. What got you into plastic surgery and what made you want to pursue a PhD and all that?
I'm a little bit of a unicorn in that I knew very early, or I thought I knew very early, that I wanted to do plastics because I grew up in Europe. I came from a long academic family. I'm a fourth generation, now academician. But I grew up with a history, a love of history and art and science. Both of my parents are scientists. So I loved all of those components. I always traveled a lot and really valued history, aesthetics of architecture, for example. I studied medieval architecture in high school, and as a high school graduation requirement, we had to do an externship. So I didn't know what in. I knew medicine was an option, and I just learned about what plastic surgery was because my best friend was getting a rhinoplasty, and I was the only one she shared that with. And so I read a bit further, and I ended up calling Jim Zinn's office, who was the head of plastic surgery at the Cleveland Clinic in Cleveland, where I did high school. Wow. And I spent a number of weeks with him, and this was all before HIPAA, so I was able to do a lot of things that students in high school now are not able to do. And I loved it.
That's awesome.
And then I went to undergrad in Princeton, and I studied medieval history and molecular biology. So I wrote 2 theses, and I always kept the interest in all of those going. And then, again, I loved medicine, but I loved surgery. And of all the surgeries that I did, David Lowe, who was my mentor in the 200 level section, was really the one who confirmed yet again at that level, after many years at that point, that plastic surgery was my true love, because it really combined science, art, aesthetics, and the technical expertise.
Yeah, you like the beauty of architecture you studied, maybe the beauty on the molecular level of things, and now the beauty in, surgery.
And the innovation of it all, because it's constantly changing.
Yeah. When did you decide, how far into your training did you decide cosmetics? I know we just talked about you love beauty, but plastic surgery is a huge umbrella. How did you decide cosmetics?
Well, the face was always my primary interest because I think it really reflects the identity of the person. So when I came into plastics in my medical school and residency training, we had the fathers of craniofacial surgery here. So it was people like Dr. Whitaker, Dr. Bartlett, Dr. LaRosa, and so I was exposed to them much more so than anything else. And then aesthetics of the face really became a natural extension of that, and is a natural extension of that. And so that really spoke to me much more closely than anything else.
Wow. Yeah, and then that kind of begs the question, because I feel like most people in my position think of cosmetic surgery as, if you want to pursue that, you have to go into private practice. So one of the things that we wanted to talk to you about is, not only are you a leader in cosmetic surgery, but you're also a leader at an academic institution in cosmetic surgery. How do you do that? What's the difference between the two? And was that always your plan?
True. It is unusual to be an aesthetic surgeon in an academic practice. It is nowadays. I shouldn't say it was historically.
Okay.
I think it's changed over the course of time as academic institutions, administrations, and many other regulatory factors have limited the amount of practice that can be done at the aesthetic level. But I think for me, it was really important to stay in academia because I'm really dedicated to research. I think we have to innovate, whether it's basic science or clinical research. And I think we have to continue educating our medical students, our residents. And if we can't do it here at Penn, then we can't do it anywhere. So this is the best place to do it. And so for me personally, it was very important. But it is tough. There are a lot of limitations that you have to deal with. But, Many people leave academia to do aesthetics because it is financially much more rewarding.
Yeah, that's an important topic.
It is, that's the reality, it's true. But there are also many other components of academic stability that are beneficial. For me, for example, it was important to have the stability of being in one place, of having the longevity, and because I wanted that for my family. And it was intimately tied to research. But for many residents, such as yourself, who are considering aesthetics, I think there are two options available. But the academic institutions really have to go back and recommit, I think, to maintaining the integrity and rigor of aesthetic education. And that's one of the things that we talk about in many of the forums.
I think Penn is at the forefront of that, especially with our chief resident clinic, which I know you're the director of, and you're also the director of the skincare program. Can you talk a little bit about what those two things are?
Sure. So when I started my attending position here, really the cosmetic surgery was surgery and skincare. And Dr. Whitaker really believed in the value of skincare. If you don't have the envelope that is idealized and optimized, you're not going to have a good face result, right? You can have a perfect surgery and a perfect surgery technique, but if the skin isn't good, it's not going to reflect well. So that was always historically a strong aspect of Penn plastic surgery. When I started, there were very few adjunct procedures such as injectables, and so I added that component to the practice and maintained the strength of both the surgical, the skincare program, and now the injectable and other device entities. Because what's happened to the field is that it's evolved very quickly, both at the addition of a lot of different interventions, procedures, but also our patients have become much more savvy over the course of time, and they want an integrated approach, and I think we have to deliver that to them.
So you have such a vast knowledge in all of this aesthetic skincare products. I know with my little conversations with you from time to time, which products do you believe in and do you use?
Good question. So I try everything. Everything that we carry here has been vetted by me personally. I read all the research studies. I try the products. Our staff tries the products. If the companies aren't willing to allow us to do that, then it's a no-go for us. But I think what we've learned over the course of time, and more recently, I would say in the last 3 years or so, is the importance of the skin biome. So much like the gut biome, the skin biome is very intricately connected with our overall health, but also our skin health. So you have to restore that first. And we have a skin biome regimen. I don't know if I can say brands here. I don't represent them or have any interest in them, but establishing the good skin health is critical. So the skin biome is our first line of defense, that with SPF. Once you know that your skin biome is stable, then that means your inflammatory markers are way diminished. So
what do you use for that?
It's a regimen called BioJuve. Right. It's actually active microbes that you put on your skin.
Wow.
And it restores the balance. I wouldn't say need.
I just cover it up with a beard. So
yes. We can fix that.
Okay, so what else?
So once you have that under control, then you add your active ingredients, right? Your retinoic acid, so either retinol or Tazarac, which is a retinoic acid that I like. Your antioxidants. And then for women, what we're learning more and more is topical estrogen, starting at the premenopausal stage. So in your early 40s, as the estrogen levels go down, topical estrogen is critical.
And when do you do these things? Like at night before you go to bed?
A combination. So at night, you're repairing all the damage that's caused during the day. And during the day, which means those are the products you put on, the more active ingredients like your retinols and your estrogens, etc. And during the day, you're protecting your skin. So that's when you throw on the antioxidants that protect against damage. At night, you also want to be more hydrated, so you're using more emollient products. During the day, you don't need that because you're putting so many different layers.
Are these over the counter? Or?
Some of them are over the counter. The products we carry here are all medical grade, so you don't typically find them on things like Amazon. We stand behind the products, but some of them are prescription, like the retinol and the estrogen and the hydroquinone or any pigment blocker agent.
And this is really important. I think a lot of plastic surgeons don't realize how important this is, because if you're a plastic surgeon, you should be taking care of your skin. It's kind of like if you were a dentist and came in with bad looking teeth or didn't brush your teeth, it's not a great look.
Absolutely. I don't think you trust very much a cardiologist or a cardiothoracic surgeon who's, doesn't reflect what he practices or she practices.
I agree.
I feel like the image that you portray in plastic surgery is so important.
Yeah.
It's so important.
And I totally agree. And I think we've gone a little bit in the opposite direction, where people are starting to look overdone, especially in the injectable field. And I think that really, I spend a lot of time uneducating patients who come in fearful of certain things, because of course that's what you're going to see. That's what you're going to see walking down the street or on TV. You're going to see the results that stand out to you. The people who look very healthy and natural, you're not going to think twice about. You're just going to think, oh, they have good genetics. Well, that's not really the case. They just have had very good work done.
I wanted to backtrack a little bit to the talk about finances, because clearly that's a very important topic when it comes to private practice versus academic institutions. So what advice do you have for people who may want to build an academic cosmetic practice? Do you think it's feasible? Is it something they should do? Things they should consider?
I think it's feasible, and Penn is a little bit different than most institutions in that it doesn't typically allow hybrid systems where you're both a primary faculty here, but also have an independent, financially independent private practice. Many institutions do allow that. So I would seek out, if that's what you're aiming for, I would seek out an institution, for example, UT Southwest or many other institutions have the hybrid model where you can still be a faculty member, but you run your practice independently.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think you were kind of ahead of your time. I also talked about this with Dr. Whitaker on our podcast with him when he started the Center for Human Appearance. It was back at a time when it was taboo to kind of talk about appearance. Doctors didn't advertise like they do today. Cosmetics wasn't talked about. And now fast forward, our most academic meetings have sections dedicated to it. Our most academic journals have sections dedicated to it. And, you kind of got into the academic and cosmetic realm, way before. And now we're kind of moving back into that direction where everybody wants to get in on that, have their own, residents choose programs based off of their chief resident clinic. How much because that's a way for you to get in and have autonomy and kind of act like an attending before you graduate. And I just want to commend you for that.
Oh, well, thank you. I think it's a really important value. And I think you're right. As we're seeing for undergrad institutions, right, students and parents are looking at ROIs out of an undergrad education. What are these kids coming out of college, what are they making in their first job? So those numbers are real. And I think we're going to see a similar trend in residency programs where the residents want to look specifically, where are they coming out of these institutions and where are they going and what are the range of salaries? What kind of value are we giving them? One of the things I'm talking about on Thursday during my grand rounds is the value of education and looking at all of these things. And I think it's really important to talk about the business side of plastic surgery. Aesthetics is a natural discussion, right, because it's largely a cash-based practice. But I think medicine overall has become a business in many ways, and it's hard to talk about on the recon side. But on the aesthetic side, I think it's become much more palatable, and it's important to talk about it.
Yeah, and I think, like I was saying, everybody wants to get in on the game. Even the reconstructive side wants to get in on the game because they're now talking about their flaps surviving, but now take it to the next level. How do we make them look good? So everybody comes back to the same thing,
And I think one thing that I'm curious about, and I don't know if you face this or consider this, but a place like Penn that's so productivity focused, good and bad, but where number of cases that you do is very important, obviously. But cosmetic surgery, there's a finesse to doing a facelift, taking your time. You obviously don't do that. It's not as many cases.
Correct.
It's like purely breast recon. How does that affect how you're viewed by the hospital system, and how do you potentially combat that?
Well, I have a very different model of my metrics. So as opposed to being measured on number of cases or RVUs or whatever the metrics are for insurance-based practices, my metrics are different. My metrics are more cash. And so it could be that I do one facelift for, $50,000 versus 2.5 facelifts for the same amount. It's the overall amount that's important. So for me, it gives me the freedom to really treat patients in a very tailored fashion, because I don't do the same facelift on two patients. It allows me to customize everything that I do, because I'm not bound by those numbers.
Yes.
Because ultimately, in the end, I know I have to bring in X. And so I can allocate that in whatever fashion I think is best.
That's helpful.
Cool. Looking ahead and forward, where do you see the future of cosmetic surgery going?
Oh, I think about that all the time, because I think of all the fields of medicine, it's probably the fastest changing, highest evolving field. I mean, there's so many different aspects to it in terms of, and I'm speaking about this on Thursday, in terms of health span optimization, in terms of social media and the social culture changes that we've experienced, the adoption of AI and how that's changing the way that private practices, at least, and we're probably way behind the ball on this, are using AI to generate not only new patients, but also manage and look at their ROIs and all of those components and optimize their practices and the patient experience. So there are many different things, and that doesn't even include all the new tricks and tools and that we have that are constantly changing. We have new indications for toxins all the time, new indications for fillers, new fillers coming on the market, new devices. Really, the surgery component has not been changing as much as all the components around it. So basically safety and in anesthesia, the way we treat patients, the way they come out of anesthesia, and we minimize all of those side effects. But it's changing so quickly, and I think the way of the future is really regenerative approaches to our tissues, both from an aesthetic and a reconstructive standpoint.
Cool.
And your
Exciting.
PhD background probably helps you think in that mindset.
Correct. And I participated in a lot of think tanks on innovation and regenerative medicine and
Anti-aging.
and all of those components. And initially, it was all about the stem cells, but we've learned that stem cells can't act in isolation, right? And so we've stepped away from that a little bit and more about tissue regeneration and maintenance. What can we do? Can we identify, let's say, the ideal looking face in a given woman or man's life? Let's say it's at the age of 35. Right there, right? He's at his peak.
Yeah.
How do we keep him looking
Zoom
like
in.
this? We won't talk about the function, but at least looking like this, right? We want to keep you as a snapshot. So if we want to keep you like this, we should have started 5 to 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And so we have all the data to look back longitudinally and really understand how things work in the long term. I think neuromodulation is one of those things that's going to see an explosion, because we now appreciate that doing pre-tox or baby tox or whatever you want to call it, preventative toxin, is critical for the face and the neck long term. So that's the ideal, is to keep Saeed looking like this
That's awesome.
for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
So talking about that stuff, not about me.
Yeah, he loves that topic. Let's just.
No, but it's because sometimes I think to myself, like, if I were to go back in my life, like I spent 2 years at the NIH doing basic science work. You got your PhD. If you were to go back and redo anything, would you still get your PhD? And do you think without it, you'd still be where you are?
I definitely would not be where I am. I don't think I would change anything, right? Because each person's journey is unique. And
that was a legit PhD.
That
So
was
how
a
many years
legit
did that
PhD,
take?
2 science manuscripts.
Oh my gosh.
But how many years?
Well, it was a combined program, so it was a 4 and 4, so I completed it in 8. But that was after doing a year of research at Harvard before starting
my God.
that program, and that was Princeton. My family laughs at me because I have an entire shelf of all of the theses that I've written. And
So you wouldn't do anything different?
I mean, there's certainly mistakes I've made.
Yeah.
But you learn from them.
I learned from them. That's the story. And I think it takes some time you have to be humble and you have to constantly evolve. But I would not do it any differently because I think it gives me the insight that makes me that unicorn.
Yeah.
Because very few people have that historical look at things, whether it's
Yeah.
from science, from art, from history, from different cultures. And I think I like to use all of those tools because our goal really is ultimately to educate the new generation and advance the field.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm on my trauma rotation. I think I aged about 20 years in 1 week, so I need to start the anti-aging process.
You got to shave that beard first.
That'll start it. But speaking about educating, the future surgeons, future residents that are going to become attendings, what is some advice that you would give to them?
Oh, many pieces of advice, which are easier to give than to take. I would say try to learn as much as possible, even if it's something that you think will have no relevance to your career, because just like in life, you meet somebody you think has no impact on you, and 20 years down the line, they will. So be humble, learn as much as possible, and be thirsty and find your passion and what you're good at. It's going to be a lot of hard work, and it doesn't necessarily get easier, but it does certainly get more interesting because over the course of time, you actually get to make selections about what you do. So you get more control. So you may work just as hard, sometimes harder than when you were a resident, but you're creating those paths for yourself.
Yeah. Wow. Do you have any other questions?
No, I mean, if you didn't do plastic surgery or cosmetic surgery, what would you do?
Oh, I love to write, so maybe a writer.
What do you write?
Theses.
So, opinion papers, critiques, editorials. No, I just love to write and read. I love to travel. Maybe a travel writer.
Yeah,
How is that?
that would be awesome.
That's a
That would be
win-win,
great.
right?
Yeah.
Fashion, maybe something
Fashion designer.
Yeah.
I love to cut and sew and do all
Yeah.
of those things. Or maybe make clothes as I travel.
Yeah.
Design
I love that.
according to the culture and the architecture of the
neat.
region.
Yeah.
How's that?
And then you've been written about in the New York Times, many other places, news, media. What are you most proud of?
I would say first my family, then my patients, and my students and residents, because I didn't come into this process really appreciating the value of mentorship. Or perhaps I did because I had many excellent mentors, but I never thought I could become one myself. It came about in a very organic fashion, and I'm very grateful for that, because one of the residents told me today that they think that I have a project going with almost each resident ongoing right now. And it's just, I think sharing and sharing that journey with the next generation is really invaluable.
We have a really long project, but it's coming to the end. But it's coming to the end now.
Coming to the end in a good
Sure.
way.
In a good way, yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's good.
Yeah.
But no, I think that's another thing that makes Penn so special. Everyone we interview or talk about mentorship comes up organically. Isn't that
Yeah.
something that's so special about Penn and everything
I
here?
think it comes from above and it trickles down, and I know that sounds very stereotypical, but Dr. Whitaker was like that. Dr. Serletti certainly like that. We've inherited it, and it's just really important to support one another and to have these discussions. And even though we've grown tremendously, I think we still have pockets of people who spend a lot of time together, and we may not see each other very frequently because we're spread out, but it feels very much like a tight-knit community.
Yeah, that's one of the best things about this place.
Absolutely.
We have 2 final questions for you, and we ask these to all of our guests now. What's your go-to music in the OR?
Oh, I have a huge mix, which is typically a combination of 1980s, 70s, kind of Euro trash, a lot of ABBA, Bee Gees, a lot of
That's awesome.
opera.
That's cool.
Love that.
Julio Iglesias.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of disco.
I love
I would
that.
say disco
That's
was
awesome.
the predominant.
That's great. Yeah, you want to ask the last one?
Yeah, I forgot what the last
The last one. It is, what's your favorite surgical instrument?
Ooh, favorite surgical instrument.
Botox.
Yes.
You know my OR gangster name that I was given by the residents, 30 gauge.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I love that.
My favorite surgical instrument, probably an iris scissor.
Yes, I agree with that.
A sharp one,
good
a
iris
sharp
scissor.
curved
Yeah, yeah.
one.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much for joining
Thank
us.
you.
Thank you.
This was great.
Cool.
Awesome.